Welcome in, everybody, to the Full-Time Fantasy Podcast. I'm your co-host, Billy Muzio. With me, as always, my partner in crime, Jody Smith. Tonight, we're going to be running through with our Week 16 rankings, talking about running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends. I know there's a lot of questions surrounding the quarterback position and what you should be doing, so feel free to throw those questions into the chat here on YouTube, and we'll be happy to answer as many start-sit questions as we can. There's a lot to cover tonight, not a lot of time to do it, so let's hop right into it, Jody. First player I want to talk about tonight is Jerick McKinnon. So it seems to be he has taken over a stranglehold of the running back one position here for Kansas City. This week they get Seattle. He comes in as my running back 14, your running back 14 as well. ECR is running back 16. Last week, he almost nearly doubled the snap count of Isaiah Pacheco. Pacheco had that costly fumble. McKinnon saw 62.3% of snaps this last week, and Pacheco saw 35.1% of snaps. How do you foresee this backfield split moving forward, and is Jerick McKinnon a viable top 15 running back for the rest of the season?
I don't know about rest of season. It's so hard to say. When you've been the number one overall running back in consecutive weeks, it's hard to pencil him outside of your top 20 or 25. But you hit on the usage, and that's why he's been so deadly. It's not just he's just getting almost all of the receiving work now out of the backfield. It's just that he also comes in around short yardage. He's coming in and he's being effective as a red zone. We saw the walk-off touchdown run last week to beat the quite scrappy Texans, and that's what we've been kind of seeing out of McKinnon. He's not that far from removed, Billy. When you and I do our rankings every week, I was like higher every week on McKinnon, and then he hit that little cold stretch like 3-4 weeks ago where, it was kind of hurting my rankings and all that. But this week, to me, he's a very strong RB2. Playing at home against Seattle, I know it's going to be cold, but the weather should be clear. The wind shouldn't be a factor. And hosting the Seahawks, this team's starting to kind of fade here, but in particular defensively, they've given up the second most fantasy points to running backs. The game script you would think should favor McKinnon and the ground game, with Kansas City being 10-point home favorites. This is, it's a similar situation as what we've seen the last 2 weeks where the Chiefs were around double-digit favorites, and we've seen McKinnon, like I said, rattle off consecutive overall number one running back finishes. And the thing that's making him such a safe play has been that target share. As much as Kansas City rotates their targets amongst their receiving core, McKinnon's been pretty safe with a 16 and 23% target share over the last 2 weeks. I foresee that kind of usage continuing over this week, and like I said, I feel like he's a really strong RB2.
Yeah, he's been pretty exceptional where he's been making up a lot of his ground has been in the passing game. We saw 8 targets last week, 9 targets the week before. He combined 182 yards in the air and 3 touchdowns through the air for Jerick McKinnon. So it's nice to see a Chiefs running back finally being utilized. And we've always liked Jerick McKinnon's skill set. It just hasn't been something that's been sustainable for a full year due to injuries or whatever it may be, but he's always had the skill set to succeed. It seems to be last year we had that late surge from Jerick McKinnon. It looks like the Chiefs are following the footprints again here in 2022 and going to carry that over into the playoffs. Next running back, let's talk about Alvin Kamara. My running back 9, your running back 12. ECR is 12. They're facing off versus Cleveland this week. And we all know Cleveland is atrocious against the run. They give up 5.4 yards per carry. They give up third most fantasy points in the NFL to opposing running backs. What's your take on Alvin Kamara this week? And do we expect to see more usage now with Olave ruled out and Jarvis Landry to IR?
Yeah, the game script you would think is starting to favor the running game, in particular in this situation, as we know, as we're this looks like a potentially brutal weather schedule for this slate. In particular, this game, which actually looks like it's going to be the worst there in Cleveland, with 7 degrees is the forecast temperature. That's one thing, but 26-mile-an-hour sustained wind with gusts of 40 miles an hour, that's extremely problematic. I know Andy Dalton has plenty of experience playing in cold weather, so it's not going to be that huge of a factor for him per se. But you hit it. Chris Olave's out, Jarvis Landry's out. that's bad news at all for the passing game. And not to mention, the Saints had the second lowest implied total on the whole board this week at 14.75 points. Doesn't sound like the kind of game where you want to load up on your Saints. Now, obviously, the usage for Alvin Kamara last week was very encouraging. He had 21 carries, which you'd like to see. I don't think the club has any confidence at all in the running backs behind him. We saw David Johnson last week fumble, and it's hard to say that they'll use their satellite running backs this week, if for no other reason than it feels like the kind of game where you might see 30 or 35 rush attempts, and I expect that out of both teams. But just because of that, the low total and the potential for the weather to just wreak havoc on the entire offense, it feels like the Browns, as bad as they've been against the run, they may be able to stack the line and cause some problems for Kamara. So as much as, at this point, if you've held on to Kamara all year, you're starting him. And like I said, I have him as an RB12, which is, that's me telling you that, he's right there on the RB1, RB2 borderline. I know you're a little bit higher, but I mean, I don't see at this point how you can bench him. You just have to lower your PPR expectations. The chances that he's going to catch 6 to 8 passes is pretty low in this game.
Yeah, I love the matchup, though. Cleveland has been tougher, though, in the run for the past 2 and 4 weeks on the season, bottom 3 against the run, but they have been tougher down the stretch. But still, got to love the amount of yards per carry they give up. And now with a lot of the weapons shelved for this offense, Kamara could see himself in a larger workload situation. Even with David Johnson active last week, he saw 61.8% of snaps. David Johnson saw 32.7. I don't expect that to change that much moving forward. DJ is kind of a shell of himself, and even when he was still running pretty frequently with teams, he was a shell of himself. So I still expect Alvin Kamara to lead this backfield and probably see an uptick in usage here in Week 16. Next running back I want to talk about is Zach Moss. So, of course, Jonathan Taylor goes down with a injury. They shelved him on IR. We have a combination, it seems to be, between Zach Moss and Deion Jackson. News this week was that Matt Ryan is also going to be benched in place of Nick Foles. What is your take on this offense here this week? They're facing the Chargers. Is Zach Moss the RB1 in this backfield, or do you like Deion Jackson more? It looks like we both have him lower than ECR. I have him as running back 37. You have him as running back 36. ECR is running back 34, so slightly lower than average. But how do you expect this backfield snap counts to shake up, and what do you expect from Nick Foles here in Week 16?
Well, looking back, Foles wasn't all that terrible. Looking back, he started quite a few games in 2020 for the Bears. He wasn't terrible. If anything, about the same numbers, if not even a little bit better than what we've seen out of Matt Ryan for the vast majority of these starts with the Colts. But that said, with Zach Moss, I'm a little hesitant to get all excited about him. I loved, the 21 carries he had last week. Didn't care so much for the ineffectiveness. He was only targeted once. He averaged well under 4 yards a carry. 67% snap share was great, but you have to look at it. This was a game with the Colts leading at halftime, as we infamously know, 33-0. So he got a ton of usage right up until, towards the end of the game. So I don't necessarily expect that kind of game script to carry over. If the Colts are currently 4.5-point home dogs to the Chargers on Monday night, feels like with Foles maybe adds a little more effectiveness to the passing game. So I feel like maybe, Billy, by the time you and I finalize our rankings Saturday morning, it feels like I might have Jackson really, really close to where I have Moss, because we saw earlier this year, Jackson's a better receiver. We know that, but we saw earlier this year, the Colts were happy to use Jackson. He had that great. I think he finished RB1 that 1 week where he caught a ton of passes and came in and was really effective as a runner. Now, I know it's a different staff with Jeff Saturday now, so we don't know if that kind of usage will carry over, but I do believe he will factor in more in that area of the game. With the Colts being home dogs, it feels like they'll use him a little bit more than they did Moss. So it feels like, for all the people that went and blew all their remaining fab on Zach Moss, you can still roll with him, but I would enter it with quite a bit of caution.
Yeah, I think both options will be hard to trust from this backfield, whether it's Deion Jackson or Zach Moss. Zach Moss did outsnap him 67.1 to 31.6. Take that with a grain of salt, though, because it's a new week and a new opponent. You hit the hammer on the nail. Deion Jackson, is used a little bit more in the passing game. But we do not know what to expect here moving forward. It's funny you mentioned you're going to have them closer together. I actually have them back-to-back in rankings, 37 and 38 inside my rankings here. So I think it could be either one of them. They could be a hot hand approach. I think if you went out and spent money on Zach Moss, it might be tough to trust him here in Week 16. And you may not have many options, but I would hope that if you do, you'd look elsewhere. Next running back, Tyler Algier had a great week last week. This week he gets Baltimore. I have him as running back 34. You have him as 38. ECR is at 37. So you're slightly lower than me on Algier. What's the reasoning?
It feels like an overreaction to this blow-up game that we just saw, which, we tend to do because what happens is a player comes out of nowhere. So we go back and we look at some things, and maybe he's been a little bit better. Maybe it was just problematic, or maybe it was just situational. But what you'd like to see out of Algier is that he has had a 50% snap share over the last couple of games, which is really, really good. But before last week's blow-up game, it was a little problematic in the sense that he had under 8 PPR points 4 straight games before he blew up last week, which, has me a little concerned. Now, that blow-up game last week came against the Saints, who typically are they're a little bit above average against the running backs from a fantasy perspective. I think they've given up the 14th most running points to running backs. Ravens, though, have given up the 8th fewest fantasy points to running backs, and they've been trending like really, really good lately. They've been really, really tough. No running back other than Nick Chubb has rushed for more than 90 yards against the Ravens since week 6. And then again, I'm looking at implied totals. We didn't see a very good first start for Desmond Ridder. You get a defense like the Ravens that can get after the quarterback. And like I said, their defense has been trending in the right direction, both against the pass and run over the last couple of months. The Falcons have the lowest implied total of the entire week at 14.25 points. So I'm a little skeptical. As good as Algier has been in this offense where they're so ground heavy, and how they've managed to work him and Cordell Patterson in pretty nicely, I'm a little skeptical that he can come anywhere close to last week's production. So that's why I'm a little lower than most other experts are on him right now.
Yeah, you hit the hammer on the nail. About 50% of snaps. We do know that Patterson's a little banged up as well. I had reason why I have him a little higher. But you are right. Baltimore has been very tough against the run. They are the 4th best on the year. For the last 4 weeks, they're the 5th best. In the last 2 weeks, though, they're the 9th best. So still a stout run defense. I would expect to see a little bit more usage, though, out of them. I think they are starting to see what their rookies have, right? We saw Ridder, who was taking over the helm. We're starting to see a little bit more Tyler Algier. I would not be surprised for them to continue to lean on these rookies to see what they have in them as the season ends, and they want to see what they have prior to heading into the offseason. So I like Algier, slightly ahead of ADP on him. You're just behind it, but overall a viable streaming option, we believe, here in Week 16. Raheem Mostert. This is an interesting one because I expect ADP to change, especially now that Wilson got in another limited practice. But as of today, Raheem Mostert, so today is 12/22, Thursday night. Raheem Mostert, running back 21 for me, running back 20 for you. ECR is running back 20. Let's play this two ways. If Wilson were to miss the week, do you leave him here at running back 20, or where do you adjust him to? And if Wilson is in, how much do we expect him to play, and where do you rank Mostert?
Yeah, my ranking right now is basically implying 50-50 on Wilson, because I feel like if Jeff Wilson's ruled out, you're going to probably move Raheem Mostert up 5 or 6 spots. going to get him up to a really, really strong RB2. I mean, just based on what we saw last week out of him as the featured guy, and then the matchup, fantastic matchup. The Packers have been a bottom 10 run defense over like the last month or so. In their last 3 games, they're giving up 154 yards a game on the ground just to running backs, not even mention quarterbacks. They've also given up 7 rushing touchdowns to running backs in their last 5. So this is a primo matchup for the Dolphins, and I mean, yeah, for the Dolphins offense. But if Wilson's rolled out, I'm getting pretty strong, like I said, to getting Mostert up into my top 14, really, really close to RB1 range. And if Jeff Wilson's coming back, well, then, I feel like we're ranking him now at 20 or 21 where you have him. I feel like I'll probably drop him a similar number of spots, maybe 4 to 5 spots. I still probably feel pretty comfortable with him as a flex option. It feels like he's been the better option for them over like the last, 4 or 5 weeks anyway, even when both of them were active. So, it's just a wait and see game for me right now. I feel like even with Wilson, I'm probably rolling with him. But if Wilson's rolled out, obviously, then he becomes a must start.
Yeah, I was pretty high on Mostert last week. He finished with 136 yards on the ground, another 20 in receiving. No touchdown, unfortunately. He would have had an even bigger week. In half-point PPR, he finished as running back 13. We're going to just keep the emphasis on half-point PPR because if that's what we're ranking here for the competition. He did see 76.3% of the snaps with no Wilson, with Wilson being inactive, I should say. Ingold also saw an uptick in snaps as well, 54.2%. But I would agree with you. I think with this matchup against Green Bay, who has just been atrocious against the run, Raheem Mostert could see himself in another top 15 position if there is no Wilson active. But I think he's trending in the right direction. What his snap share will be is to be determined. He's probably limited in some capacity, so we expect Raheem Mostert to lead this backfield here in Week 16, hence why we both have him at around RB20. That's it for running backs. Let's go ahead. We have a lot of start set questions in here. A lot of people are relying on some of this advice as they are approaching their fantasy championships. So let's answer a few start set questions. Then we'll come back to wide receivers, and then we'll go back to the start sets again, and we'll wrap it up with tight ends. So the first one is from a regular that we have on the podcast, Colt here, and he says, "Good evening, Kirk, Pacheco, Chark, or Chig, full PPR." 2-point tight end premium, so there is a pretty big bonus here for tight ends, 2 points. He needs 1 for the flex in the semis. ETN is also already starting. Just wondering if he should limit the exposure to tonight's game. What's your take?
Yes, I'm right now. My whole thing is every player that's part of a passing game in this game tonight, I've lowered. I don't really want to freak out and overreact to things like weather, but this feels like it's upper 30s to lower 40s temperature with winds 20 plus miles an hour and rain. That sounds like a very, very bad game script for the passing game. So a guy like Christian Kirk, as great as he's been coming out of the slot, I have him quite a bit lower than what his ECR, which I want to say it's still around wide receiver 20 or 21. I've got him closer to 26, 28, somewhere in that range. I mean, it's still saying he's a decent start, but again, if you already have Etienne going in this game and you don't, I mean, I understand how terrible it is to load up on a Thursday game, especially in the playoffs, and if everything goes haywire, then you're sitting on that for the next, well, normally you're sitting on it for 3 days and you're just like upset with yourself. Now this week it's only going to be 2 days, but because of the PPR premium, I think Okonkwo is a decent start facing the Texans. It's going to be cold there in Tennessee, but it doesn't feel like the weather's going to be problematic. The Texans have had issues as much as they look like on paper a good defense, especially against wide receivers. They have had issues with tight ends. So that's an interesting start. And who was the other option?
Let me see here. He's got Kirk, Pacheco, Chark, or Chig from Tennessee.
Yeah, Pacheco, again, Kansas City's at home, 10-point favorites. You worry about Pacheco with the fumble last week, but looking at his usage over the last month, he's still been trotting out 15 plus carries in this game. So I've still got him pretty comfortably as an RB2, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, me too.
So, I mean, honestly, I'm looking at it. Okonkwo is interesting only because of the double points thing, but I probably would roll with Pacheco at this point. I'm anticipating, as much as we, Billy and I both like McKinnon, we probably I won't speak for you, but I'm sure that you still have Pacheco as a top 20-ish, top 25 running back. So
yeah,
it's pretty hard to sit something like that.
Pacheco at 24. So yeah, top 25 just inside of it. The 2 tight end premium is honestly pretty enticing here for Chigo, but I don't like the fact that Willis is starting this week. If we knew it was Tannehill, I'd probably say start Chigo because he's seen 5 to 6 targets in 5 straight games, or 4 straight games.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Four catches that would put him alone just in the catches at 8 fantasy points, based on your 2-point tight end premium plus the yardage. You'd probably be looking at like 13 to 14 point floor for Chigo. But with Willis at helm, I'm a little bit more hesitant, and I'd lean here on the running back and agree with Jody. I'd go with Pacheco. Next one we have up is Lawrence or Watson this week. I have them back to back this week, Jody.
Ooh, I'm still a little bit higher on Trevor Lawrence just because, I mean, coming into this week, he's a top 6 fantasy quarterback. Maybe I heard it on ESPN as I was writing this morning. Maybe I heard them say it, but the last time Trevor Lawrence faced adverse weather like this, he turned the ball over 4 or 5 times. It was an awful game. I don't necessarily know that that's going to correlate tonight, but listen, Deshaun Watson himself is going to have to deal with some really, really bad weather. Like I said, if anything, that game's weather is worse. The Saints-Browns game has an over-under that's like one of the lowest we've seen in several years. It's like 32 points, something like that. Both teams have implied totals that are just barely in the teens. I mean, it's not necessarily a game that you want to focus. And sorry, Watson's looked bad. And he looked okay in his second game, but basically in his 3 starts, he's been a below-average fantasy quarterback. And I don't know that that's going to necessarily turn around. And that kind of weather against a decent New Orleans defense. So I feel like I mean, Lawrence has a worse matchup. The weather to deal with. I still feel like his track record for being a really, really good fantasy quarterback, in particular, the last 4 to 6 weeks, I'm still rolling with him.
Yeah, I don't like the matchup. I don't like the weather, but I would be definitely rolling with Trevor Lawrence over Watson this week. We've already stated the reasons and why we're concerned with this game, but I still think that he's a better option this week than Watson. I agree with you, Jody, here, and everything that you said is pretty much what I was going to say as well. And I just like the weapons that Lawrence has.
Stop letting me steal all of it first. Maybe you answer one first.
Yeah, you're hitting the points. It's fine. He's torn between these 3. Let's pick one: Zay Jones, Bam Knight, or A.J. Dillon. I had this question earlier. I went A.J. Dillon. I like his involvement that he's been in the passing game lately. He's seen his route participation increase. He's seen his snaps increase, and like the matchup this week. So I'm going to lean A.J. Dillon. Miami is a bottom, 10, 12? I think they're bottom 10. Bottom 10 against the running back position. They've been beaten through the air as well. They've given up 7 reception touchdowns to running backs. And we have seen the increase in usage with A.J. Dillon in the passing game as well. So I lean A.J. Dillon in this scenario. I do have Bam Knight fairly close in that ranking. I have them all in that same tier, kind of clustered together. And as hot as Zay has been playing, I'm fading him this week due to the weather, the wind, and of course the matchup against the Jets.
I'm in agreement. You look at A.J. Dillon's got 4 touchdowns in his last 3 games. You got to like that usage. Like you mentioned, Billy, he's caught 3 balls in 3 consecutive games, so the usage there has increased. That's something that Donovan Knight is not really providing in that offense, and in particular, you can't expect him to provide that tonight in these kind of conditions. So I agree. I like Dillon. And I looked at my rankings. I have him actually one spot ahead of Knight, so I have him back to back. But Dillon's better weather. He's been more involved as a receiver and better game script overall.
Okay, let's do one more start sit, and then we'll hop back to receivers. Fields or Herbert this week?
Fields, for me, the Colts are still, I guess, credible defensively, but Fields, as bad as the weather potentially could be, in that Chicago Buffalo game, he has such a high floor because of what he does as a runner. Do you know that even though he's missed several games, he's actually on pace to break, or he can in the next 3 weeks, he can break Lamar Jackson's all-time rushing record for a quarterback. That shows you like how amazing he's been as a rusher. And like I said, he missed. What did Fields miss? 1 or 2 games at least, or he missed 1.
Yeah, he missed week 12.
But you remember they barely used him in September. Like that coaching staff didn't know what they had. It wasn't until they were like, well, I don't know, let's try this, and boom. So imagine if they had been using him that way the whole year. Shit, he might be contending with the leading rushers in the entire league. I feel like you could argue both of them in this case. I just prefer Justin Fields, and if anything, I was pretty high on Herbert last week, and it was a pretty big letdown. So maybe I'm still a little on tilt because of that. But they're both probably really, really close to each other. My rankings, I'll click on it real quick. Billy,
I have them back to back. I have them at 3 and 4. I have Fields ahead of them, and simply due to the rushing. You hit the hammer on the nail. I mean, 18 attempts last week, 85 yards and a touchdown on the ground. The week prior, 13 for 147 and 2 touchdowns on the ground. Prior to that, 15 attempts, 178, 1 on the ground, 80 and 6, 1 on the ground. I mean, every single week it's 1 on the ground, 2 on the ground, and so. We both know that his rushing upside is far superior than his passing upside. He's only broken 200 yards in the air twice all season. It was against Green Bay and then against Minnesota. So it's funny, it's same division, but what he's able to do on the ground is going to keep him inside the top 7, 6 every single week in fantasy.
That's such a high floor.
Yeah, exactly. When you're talking about 8 points just alone on rushing plus a possible touchdown, you're talking about 12 to 13 points as a floor before you even add in his passing statistics. So I really like Fields. It's kind of what I expected from him all year. He was one of my most owned best ball players. I was really disappointed and ready to take the L when we hit week 5, when he was like constantly bottom 5 in the quarterback position.
I tweeted that very thing about him and Darnell Mooney and Cole Kmet towards the end of September, and they kind of Darnell Mooney was a lost case, but they turned it around for us.
They definitely turned it around. So excited to see they finally figured out how to use them. I expect the usage to continue here against Buffalo, and he's got a killer matchup the following week against Detroit. So love me some Justin Fields. Okay, back to the show sheet. Let's talk about wide receivers. The first one we'll talk about is DJ Moore. We're always talking about DJ Moore because it's just been this roller coaster ride with him this year. This week he gets Detroit, so we got to love the matchup. I have him as running back or wide receiver 20. You have him as wide receiver 20. ECR is wide receiver 24. We're both higher on him versus consensus. Go ahead and give me your reasonings.
Hat tip to Jordan Van Eck with the 33rd team for pointing out that ever since Sam Darnold took over as quarterback, they moved DJ Moore into a 68% slot snap share. There you go. It's like, the Bears couldn't figure out in September how to use Justin Fields. How could this team not figure out what to do with DJ Moore, even though you had years worth of film and stats in front of you to figure it out? But again, expecting the same fantastic matchup. The Lions have been destroyed by slot receivers all year. We saw what Christian Kirk did to them. There's been plenty of other blow-up games for slot receivers against Detroit. I mean, overall, the Lions are allowing the 3rd most fantasy points to wide receivers. Jared Goff himself and Detroit's offense, therefore, has kind of struggled on the road. So this feels like, the kind of game that Carolina can is going to get their fair share of drives to go up and down the field against the defense. It's been very, very vulnerable. And I expect the same thing to continue up. DJ Moore, I mean, you don't want to rely too much on Sam Darnold. And let's not forget that Moore had that egg he laid, a couple games ago that really cost a lot of us. But I expect the usage to get back to what we've seen in 2 out of the last 3 games, which has been a very, very strong wide receiver 2, and that's about where you and I have him ranked.
Next receiver is Donovan's Peoples-Jones. I know the weather is going to impact this game, but DPJ has been very, very productive from a fantasy perspective. We saw him with a touchdown last week. He's been pretty consistently around that wide receiver 30 range. This week, he is facing off versus the New Orleans Saints, who are beatable in the secondary. I have him as wide receiver 35, you have him at 38, ECR is 40, so we're all kind of clustered together. We're both higher on him than ECR. Do you think that the field is overreacting to the weather, or do you think that you will eventually move him down your rankings as we approach the game?
Well, what may cause me to move him down is Amari Cooper status. That's the reason I'm a little higher, I think, on Donovan Peoples-Jones right now. It's because Cooper isn't healthy. He's probably going to start, but regardless, it feels like with Deshaun Watson that Peoples-Jones has been the guy that's really clicked, that's really gelled with Watson as the number 1 receiver. I don't know if it has more to do with Cooper's, nagging injury, or if it just has to do with, hey, that's the way it played out. But it really is the weather. For you to ask, are people overreacting to the weather? It sounds, cold is one thing, a little bit of snow is another thing, but wind, that's the killer for offenses in general, in particular for wide receiver. Winds that are blowing 25 to 30, 40 miles an hour. I mean, you see what it wreaks havoc on kicking games, and it can be a problem for receivers. So, again, look at the low implied totals for both of the teams in this game. Makes me, feel like I probably have receivers that are comparable to Peoples-Jones in my lineup that I might consider. I mean, again, however, Billy, you mentioned how he's been so consistent. Like every week, man, when we were doing our rankings, I'm like, why is his ECR like 48? This guy every week's putting up wide receiver 30 to 34 numbers. I mean, boom, it was like the same zone every week, and I kept ranking him up there. And finally, everyone else has caught up to it. But I entered this game a little cautious for the reasons I just said on the weather being first and foremost, and then just the whole just low expectations for this game in general.
Yeah, you look back at his games all the way back to week 6, wide receiver 33, wide receiver 38, wide receiver 31, wide receiver 26, had a big week versus Buffalo where he was wide receiver 14, down week versus Tampa, wide receiver 84, and then 25, 14, 29. So he has been just quietly, been wide receiver 30 or better almost every single week since, week 6. And it's weather's a little bit of an alarm here this week, but I think that, bottom line, I think he's clicking. Now, the thing that I think is the one piece that we got to watch out is New Orleans was very beatable in the secondary the first, half to second half of the season. And now the last 4 weeks, they've really tightened up. They've gotten a little healthier back there. And we've seen them be a lot tougher on that front. Like year to date, they've given up the 14th most fantasy points to the wide receiver position. And the last 4 weeks, they are, the 9th best. And if you look at the last 2 weeks, they've even gotten better. They're number 2 overall versus the wide receiver position. So it is a tough matchup. It is bad weather. I might be slightly high on him this week, but his consistency has been hard to ignore. Next receiver I want to talk about is same game, opposite side of the ball, Rashid Shaheed. So the kid has kind of blown up as of lately, and now we have no Jarvis Landry. We have no Chris Olave. ECR right now has not caught up. ECR is at wide receiver 62. You're at 55. I was at 50 when we did this show sheet. I'm actually now up to 40 on him, as they're probably most likely their wide receiver 1 this week. What is your take on Rashid Shaheed with both the receivers out? I'm assuming your rank will adjust now. Where do you rank him now with the news today?
I don't know that he'll get inside my top 50 only because of, again, I don't want to keep hitting on weather, but I have a lot of concerns for this game in particular. So it feels like his potential upside is capped, because what Shaheed has been is an extremely valuable deep threat. You've seen him catch a ton of these 30 and 40-yard bombs downfield. You take that element out in this situation with a roaring wind and just the ball's heavier than normally it feels like.
He can run the ball. I mean, he has a rushing attempt for 44 yards. He's had one attempt to the last 3 games.
Yeah, hey, and I'd like to see that because, like I said, we hit on just a little while ago talking about Alvin Kamara that there's concerns with the running backs outside of Kamara. That's why I kind of think like this is an interesting week for ranking Taysom Hill because it feels like, okay, well, Hill's not going to do much as a receiver, which we're used to. But in a game that they may run 35 or 40 times a game, how many is Taysom Hill going to rack up? Same thing for Shaheed. He could see a handful of carries. So
I'm like not looking forward to Taysom Hill this week. I feel like he's gonna just annihilate my tight end rankings. I have him sitting at 10 currently. I feel like it might be low, but it also could be high. Like you never know what the usage we're going to see from him.
You finally did well at tight end last week. You were big on George Kittle, which came through for you. You were big on Darren Waller. We'll talk about him in a minute. He came through for you. So you finally had a great week. So yes.
Yeah, Taysom Hill could though like mess everything up. He could finish as like the tight end 1 when he runs the ball like 6 times and gets 4 or 5 targets this week, but I don't think they'll still involve him that much in the passing game. He might see him a little bit more in the running game, but he's such a hard individual to rank because his snaps just aren't there, but he has the ability to break one off and run it for 30 yards.
We need to look at his home road splits because it feels like most of these blow up games he's had have been at home.
Yeah, none of it has been in the receiving game though either. It's all been in the running game. Like 7 attempts, 6 attempts, 9 attempts, 3 attempts, and you look at targets. He's only has 11 targets all season, and so we know it's going to have to come on the ground, and so that's the hard part is because we just don't know what to expect from his usage on a week-to-week basis, and he's one of the most frustrating people in the world to rank right now. It drives me mad. It really is. Moving on, we have 2 more receivers. Let's talk about Jahan Dotson. So Washington here gets San Francisco this week. San Francisco's been very tough on the front. Their secondary is also tightened up. I have him as wide receiver 38. You have him as 48. ECR is split between us at 43. What don't you like about Dotson this week?
I have quarterback concerns. There's been some talk of them benching Tyler Heineke, which it has me a little hesitant coming into this game, especially with I don't necessarily expect Washington to salvage their season in this game. San Francisco, as we know, if not the premier defense in the league, is certainly top 3. They've had some issues in the secondary. They haven't been unbeatable as against the receivers, so the matchup's okay. What I like about Dotson is he's had a 22% target share over the last couple of games. That's good. But again, implied total. Washington's at 15.5 points. That's scary low in a game that I'm not necessarily expecting Heineke to, have the kind of game that he needs to put distance between himself and Carson Wentz. So I'm just a little hesitant on Dotson. He's had He's had a couple of good games, but also, we've seen him disappear for long stretches for weeks at a time. So he's just not a guy I'm real comfortable starting on a week-to-week basis.
So yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because I was actually wanting to talk about that. And it seemed to be in the beginning of the year, he had great chemistry with Wentz. He was, looking like he was possibly going to be rookie of the year when he had, finished as wide receiver. Let's take a look at the standings. Let's go to half point PPR. He was wide receiver 13 week 1, wide receiver 17 week 2. He was 96 and 3, but then 22 in week 4. Had that hamstring injury, missed weeks 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Came back in a limited capacity in 10, limited capacity in 11, limited capacity in 12. Finally seemed to be healthy and unleashed again. And week 13, he was wide receiver 18. They had their bye 14. He escaped, injury free, or I should say no setbacks. And week 15 last week, wide receiver 8. So I feel like hills and valleys have been directly correlated to his injury and the time frame for him to get over that injury and then get healthy back on the field and be utilized in a full capacity in the snap counts. If we knew he was going to see a full amount of snaps, which we have seen the last couple of weeks, do you bump him up in your rankings, or is it purely just because, I mean, because he definitely had the chemistry with Wentz too. So if they bench Heineke for Wentz, I think that might be good for Dotson.
I definitely agree. That's part of the reason why I'm a little lower on him. That hasn't been there as much as you just mentioned. How he has kind of come on, over the last. I think you said 3 games, so that's encouraging. So yeah, I'll probably end up needing to adjust him up. After hearing what you had to say there, but again, 15.5 implied total. It's a little worrisome for me.
Yeah, and his snaps aren't, wonderful. He's running about 50% snaps. He's definitely operating as a wide receiver 3. Curtis Samuel last week was 73% of snaps. We saw Terry McLaurin at 90%. Sims was at 30%. So he's out snapping Sims definitely on a week-to-week basis. I think that he has great upside. I'm excited to see his career develop. He's sneaky good, I think. And I think looking ahead to 2023, probably one of the receivers I'm going to be heavily targeting depending upon his ADP. Last receiver I want to talk about tonight is Drake London. And you notice there's a trend here. There's a lot of rookies. There's a lot of younger players I'm talking about, because the reasoning behind this is we're approaching the end of the fantasy season. I want to start discussing Dynasty a little bit. And as we start transitioning our minds and football, minds into Dynasty season, and people are looking at long-term trades in the offseason, a lot of these players have, long futures ahead of them. Drake London, in my opinion, was one of my top receivers in this draft class. I think I had Wilson ahead of him as my number 1 receiver. London was my number 2 receiver in this draft class. We liked the landing spot with London more. You and I bumped him up because of the landing spot. Didn't really equate to what we thought it was going to be with Mariota at helm. However, Ritter at helm last week, we saw I think we even talked about it on the podcast last week. We talked about how Drake London liked the ball that Ritter threw better in camp. We mentioned that last week. Usage was nice to see. We saw 11 targets last week. Unfortunately, it only equated to 7 catches for 70 yards. But we have to like the usage that we saw from him last week with Ritter. What do you think is going to happen this week against Baltimore, and where do you value Drake London moving forward? Let's talk about Dynasty as well as going into 2023.
Yeah, I love the usage. You got 50% target share last week, and it was 42% the week before. So you love the target share, but that's a glass half full thing, because it's a high target share, but it's a very, very low volume passing offense in general, and it remained even with the quarterback switch. I kind of looked at Drake London's stats, because it felt like when you see him do well, it always feels like it's indoors. So I looked at it. I think he's got 5 games that he's played outdoors, and I looked at it. He's averaging 33 receiving yards in outdoor stadiums this year. That I don't again, it's a low volume passing attack, but that to me is quite a concern, in particular when the Falcons have an implied total of 14.25 points this week against a Baltimore secondary that actually has been playing really, really well recently. In their last 3 games, the Ravens have given up the 7th fewest fantasy points to wide receivers. That is 130 yards total for the whole wide receivers each game. 130 yards per game, and they've only given up 1 touchdown to a wide receiver in the last 3 games. So a tough matchup all around. And again, it'll be, obviously it'll be cold for, the Falcons. And just quarterback concerns for Drake London. This feels like, Baltimore's going to be able to tee off and, come up with a scheme that's going to keep him very ineffective. And we saw plenty of that last week. So I'm a little hesitant to trot Drake London out in any of my lineups this week.
All right. That's it for wide receivers. Let's hop back into the chat. We have a lot of start sit questions. We're nearing the end of the show. We still got talk about a couple tight ends. So let's go ahead and look at. I skipped one first. Dak or Minshew this week? Dak for me pretty easily. And then Palmer or Dotson? I lean Dotson. What about you, Jody?
Oh, your boy. I don't know. I probably have them ranked pretty similar. Let me check on it. What Minshew? Yeah, you got to start Dak over Minshew. As much as it would be fun to go to Minshew Mania, and I wouldn't be shocked if he puts up a top 12 week. It wouldn't shock me at all. But yeah, Dak's just comfortably ahead of him.
Yeah, I have Minshew as quarterback 17 this week, and I got Dak at 9.
I've got Minshew a little bit higher than you, but yeah, Dak around the same area.
Okay, and then how about Palmer or Dotson for you?
Oh, I'm looking at the wrong thing. I was trying to look at my wide receiver rankings to see where I had him. I think we already talked about where I had Dotson. I'm just trying to look at where I had Palmer.
Palmer, I'm at 43. Dotson, I'm at 38.
Oh, Josh Palmer, I'm at 40. And we already talked about where I had Dotson. So,
okay. So,
I think Palmer comes out a little bit higher right now in my rankings.
Okay, so Jody goes Palmer. I go with Dotson. So you get to be the deciding factor there.
That's what it should be.
Freiermuth or Juwan, Chigo, or Komet this week?
Gotta like Kenny Pickett being back under center for the Steelers, so that makes me like Freiermuth a hell of a lot more than I like what I saw from him last week.
Yep, I would agree as well.
Again, with Okonkwo, Billy brought up a great point. As much as he's been good catching, deeper passes and touchdowns, you have to be really concerned about volume with Malik Willis under center. Who was the other option?
Juwan Johnson or Komet.
Again, with the weather, we talked about this Saints game so many times. So yeah, I would want to steer the other direction.
Yep, I agree with everything Jody says. Vegas also gives up the. I think it's like the 7th most to. Let's look at the tight end position. Right, they're playing Vegas, right? Yeah, Vegas. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're like the 8th or 9th most to the tight end position on the year. Got to like the matchup as well. I definitely like the fact that they get Pickett back. So look at the usage that we had prior to last week with Pickett, and Freiermuth was being targeted pretty consistently in the 6 to 8 range. So I like Freiermuth much more than the other options. Ingram versus the Jets or Goddard with Minshew. I'm going to go Goddard here.
Yeah, if I knew Goddard, I mean, they activated him, and it sounds like they're fully confident that he is going to play. But if I knew that 100%, yes, he comes out ahead of Ingram. Ingram has been overlooked all year, and I don't want to, throw fuel on the fire by overlooking him yet again in this week. Because if you look at it, I want to say that Evan Ingram's top 5, top 6 for the whole year in fantasy points at tight end, very, very, very quietly. But this game tonight, I mean, so problematic for the whole passing game. So I wouldn't want to take that. If I have a viable option to avoid this game, I would take it. And you do, because Dallas, I mean, Goddard won't have any weather to, be a factor in what game it could be. I'm expecting Minshew to be quite competent. So I'm expecting, quite a bit of points in this game. So I'd rather put my points, I'd rather put my fantasy eggs in a basket with a game that's going to be 45 to 50 points than this one tonight, which it'll be tough to get anywhere close to 40.
Yeah, that Dallas game is one of the highest over-unders of the week, so got to like the potential shootout that we have there as well. Eileen Goddard, I have him back-to-back in rankings, but
I do as well. I have Goddard 8 and Ingram 9.
Yeah, so I'm a little bit lower on both of them. I have them at, I think, 10 and 11. 11 and 12, actually. It's might adjust slightly, but I have them both back-to-back. So both very close, both good options, I think. We're not going to beat a dead horse with the weather. Next one we have is 1912 says, Merry Christmas, Billy and Jody. Dying at quarterback with Hurts injury. I have Wilson and Heineke, but can pick up Foles or Huntley. Who would you pick out of that group this week?
Ugh.
I'm assuming he means Zach Wilson. I'm going to go with Nick Foles out of this group. We're playing in a dome against the Chargers. A dome is going to be a hot commodity this week with the weather across the slate. Foles has shown the ability to be successful in the NFL as well. He's going to be able to throw to a wide receiver one and Pittman. They're going to have no stud running back behind the line of scrimmage now with JT now on IR. So they're probably going to, lean on the passing game a little bit more than running the ball with Zach Moss and Deion Jackson. So I think Foles probably sees a little bit more volume between the three of these other options. And I think the fact that he's playing in the dome is a benefit as well.
I do have Foles ranked 3 spots ahead of Wilson currently. And his other choice was Malik Willis.
I think the other choice was Huntley or Heineke.
I have Huntley lower than both of them. I mean, I was kind of high on Huntley's running ability the last 2 weeks. It's been basically non-existent. He's looked deplorable as a passer. Terrible game script again for the passing game. Now, Huntley, he's the kind of guy that can get you 40, 50 rushing yards and maybe even a shot at a touchdown, but we haven't seen it in 2 starts. So even though it's a great matchup and whatnot, I still feel Billy made some great points on Foles. And looking at my rankings, I agree.
Yeah, I got Foles at 19, Heineke 25, Huntley 26, and Zach Wilson all the way down at 28. So that's a pretty clear separation here this week for me in Week 16. Let's move along to the next question. We're nearing the end of the show. We still have a lot of questions in here. Garrett Wilson, expectations for him tonight? I don't have a lot. How about you, Jody?
No, I mean, I'm lower on ECR. He's been so good. He's a dynamic player, but yeah, I mean, I'm quite a bit lower on ECR with Wilson. I think I have him as looking at wide receiver 22 right now.
Okay. We have far more questions than I think we'll be able to answer unless we do rapid fire. So let's do rapid fire. We'll just minimize the analysis behind the answer. So that way we can get as many of these answers as we can. Need help starting quarterback for my super flex, Malik or Ritter? Eileen Ritter. What about you?
Willis.
Okay.
I gotta remember.
Pick one: Jamal Williams versus Carolina, or Pickens versus Las Vegas, or Zonovan Knight tonight.
What was the Jamal Williams?
Yep.
Zonovan and who?
Zonovan and Pickens.
George Pickens. In PPR, I might lean Pickens there.
Yeah, I lean Pickens in PPR. It is PPR. We had no Deontay Johnson practicing today either, so I'd gamble, leave Zonovan out right now, and then make up your decision between Jamal Williams and Pickens as we near the next slate. ETN or Mostert for you?
ETN.
And then Mike Williams or Lamb?
CeeDee Lamb, more consistent volume. Mike Williams is just so schizophrenic.
Okay, I like both. I like ETN and Mike Williams as well. Lamb probably gets a little bit of slay this week as well. Bradbury is no chump either, so I'll go ETN and actually I'm gonna go Mike Williams there over Lamb. So I'm gonna go ETN and Mike Will. Crazy weather, ETN or Kirk this week. I'm gonna go ETN. We don't want as much to do with the passing game. And then Daniel Jones or Minshew. I'm gonna go Danny Dimes.
That'd be funner to start Minshew.
Okay. Yeah, I got Danny Dimes. Let's see, 11 and Minshew 17, but they're close. Okay. Next one we have is really stuck with a tight end choice: Njoku or Conklin.
Njoku.
Yep, I go Njoku as well. Next one we have is ETN or Pacheco. I lean ETN.
I'll go the other way, but it's close.
Okay. Weather doesn't look too bad right now. You can't bench T-Law for a journeyman, right? I think you can.
I didn't hear you.
He's asking if you can't bench him, right? And
can't bench who?
Trevor Lawrence. I think you can.
It would depend on your options, but I still have him as a really, really close to QB1 territory.
Okay. Kirk ain't gonna win you a week. You still think he catches 5 or 6 balls? Okay, he's talking about something else. Need to Mostert, Watson, McLaurin, Judy.
Mostert, Watson. What Watson?
Christian Watson.
Oh, yeah, up until last week, so consistent. I like Mostert, assuming Wilson to be determined with him, and then McLaurin.
Okay, I like McLaurin, and I'd agree. If Wilson is out, Mostert's a must start. If they're both in, I probably would lean Watson and McLaurin.
Sounds right.
Okay, Bellinger or Dulcich?
Yes. Dulcich.
Okay, I like Dulcich as well. Pacheco, Dillon, or White?
Still like Pacheco for 15 to 17 carries.
I do as well. I got them all in that kind of back in RB2, high end RB3 range. With Hurts out, Minshew or Russell Wilson? That's a fun one.
Minshew Mania.
Yep, I go Minshew as well. Thank you, Giselle, reminding everybody, like the stream. Helps the algorithm. You're welcome, David. Palmer, White, or Jackson, PPR?
What White?
I'm assuming it's Rashad White.
And what Jackson? Sorry.
Probably Deshaun Jackson.
Deshaun Jackson. Come on now.
Deion Jackson.
Oh, we hit on that earlier. I kind of like Deion Jackson a little bit, but I still would have Rashad White ranked ahead of him.
That was a joke from like 7 weeks ago. Remember, I gave the guy crap for Deshaun Jackson, and he meant Deion Jackson.
No, I guess I forgot about that.
I was like, man, how you gonna talk about Deshaun Jackson? It was like the day he was signed, and the guy's like, I meant Deion.
Yeah, you guys got to get me a little clearer when guys have that common name.
Yeah. So who are you leaning here? White against Arizona.
I don't know. I guess gonna lean Deion Jackson from like I said, the way I figure the passing game is going to work out. So.
Okay, I lean White here. Just Arizona's been pretty exploitable in the ground, so I think they probably lean against Fournette and White in this game. Are we feeling comfortable with Zay Jones at PPR? We have a lot of Zay Jones questions tonight. On his bench, he's got Sutton, Hollywood, Jacoby, Slayton, and Goodwin. Would you start any of those options over Zay?
I still have Zay Jones ranked above, let's see, all of them, I want to say, but he's not a guy, like I said, I'm really comfortable ranking. I have Zay Jones around wide receiver 30. I just have those other guys lower than him right now.
Yep, I'm totally agreeing with you there. They're all behind wide receiver 30, and Hollywood came up with an groin injury today as well.
And McSorley is his quarterback.
Yeah, never a good sight to see a late addition to the injury report. So I would be starting Zay tonight, regardless of all the weather. The next one we have is semifinals, and his got looks like Pittman, White. I'm assuming that's Rashad White again. Waller and Zach Moss for his flex spot.
Probably leaning Pittman.
Yeah,
hoping that he does well with the new quarterback.
Foles, yeah. This one's not close to me. I would Pittman pretty easily, and then it would be Waller, quite frankly. Can DJ Chark boom this week?
That's your boy, Billy.
I'm not counting on it this week.
Yeah.
It's
tough spot.
It's also going to be a pretty cold game. I think it's said second coldest game in Carolina history. So
Jared Goff has been much better at home than on the road. So
yeah, so I'm going to say he's not going to boom this week. Second question from Valentino is needs a flex spot: Mike Evans, Mostert, Zeke, or Murray.
Gosh, you gotta like what Zeke's been able to put together the last few weeks. It'd be hard for me right now to set him.
He's been sneaky good. Like I was looking at rankings, and ECR had him at like 22 or 23.
He's still too low this week. It's been like every week.
Yeah,
so much ground.
I moved him to 15. I think I was like +5 versus ECR. And if you look at what he's done in half point PPR, I know he's not been sexy. He hasn't broken 100 yards all year on the ground, but
it's a ton of passes. But what he is doing is getting into the end zone.
Yeah, he's got a touchdown every single week since week 6, if not 2 in some weeks. He's running back 16, running back 12, 8, 13, 8, 10, 11. I mean, can't argue with that. I think I'm starting Zeke here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, half PPR for both. Oh, that's back to the question. ETN or DJ Moore? I go DJ Moore this aspect against Detroit.
I agree.
Okay, and then Bam Knight or Goodwin for Seattle?
Well, I'd rather go with Bam Knight's 15 touches than take a chance on Goodwin.
Exactly. This is funny. They said your face said it all on a current question. You must have given them the gross face. Um, let's take a look here. What do you think AJ Brown's going to do with Gardner Minshew this week?
Like I said, I think Minshew has sneaky good potential. You look at the last couple of years when he started. He, from a fantasy perspective, he's actually been pretty good. So I'm optimistic that he's, I'm a little bit higher than you on him this week. So I'm optimistic that AJ Brown can still be a wide receiver one.
Yep, I think so as well. I actually really like Minshew. I'm probably not high enough on him. I'll probably adjust it. He's been very capable in the past. He's got like a 4-point. Did a podcast earlier on the GOAT District with Theo today. I talked about he had a 4.7% touchdown rate in his career, and if you compare that to 2021, that's quarterback 13. If you compare that to 2022, that's quarterback 16. So if he finishes anywhere in between that, then that's between your number and my number. I think he's got every opportunity, and now he's got even more weapons with A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert. I mean, they have Miles Sanders, who they've talked about getting more involved as well. So I think that he has the weapons to succeed, and I think that he will do so. Looks like we got 3 more questions, and then we'll call it a night. I don't think we're going to get to tight ends tonight. Full PPR, Latavius Murray, Najee Harris, Raheem Mostert, or Tyler Algier. Pick 2.
I think the first 2 you got listed is who I'd go with. Harris and Murray in that order.
Yeah, I think this is pending news as well. If we see that Wilson is out,
Mostert sneaks up to my number 2 if Jeff Wilson is rolled out.
Yep, I'd agree with Jody there. Okay, and then Dulcich or Kmet.
I'm going to lean towards Dulcich in this week because of the conditions currently forecast for Chicago.
Okay, and then Hopkins or Evans.
Evans. Arizona with McSorley. I mean, I hate to say sit nuke, but I'd be trying to avoid him at this point. It's disappointing as Mike Evans has been. I still would start him ahead of DeAndre Hopkins right now.
What if I played you the Tracy McSorley song? Would it change your mind?
I don't know what that is, but no. Is it like that? When you get the wrong answer on the Price is Right, the horn.
Oh man, please tell me I have it on my computer somewhere still. I had it for a podcast like 2 years ago.
Price is Right horn. I got it somewhere.
I had it somewhere. We'll find it off the air. We got to get going here shortly. We got to finish our rankings before the kickoff, but I'll find it and send it to you. It's hilarious.
I play that horn all the time in our live draft when somebody makes a dumb pick, which is often.
It looks like 1912 says he lives near the stadium. It is not raining currently, but it is windy. So there we go. Boots on the ground, reporting the weather. Thank you, 1912. That's it, everybody. Have a good night. I'm going to be back tomorrow, actually, because all the games are Saturday. So I will be back tomorrow night. I got Mark Garcia from he's going to be joining me, and we're going to talk about the injury reports and talk about the slate going into Sunday. That's High-Low on Twitter. Most of you know him, and he is over at 1 Week Season. He's going to be joining me tomorrow night, and we're going to be in our full jumpsuit gears because he's a pilot too. So we're gonna have aviators on and talk planes and football. So we both pulled the radar images from our from aviation when we were looking at the weather today. We were messaging back and forth. So we said, hey, let's do a podcast tomorrow. So he's going to join me, everybody. We will see you all back here tomorrow night. Have a good night. Good luck in your Thursday matchups and your final couple weeks of fantasy. Good night, everybody.